2026 NFL Draft is literally tomorrow. And I thought on today's show we would discuss a kind of predictive last call Jacksonville Jaguars mock draft ahead of the 2026 NFL Draft. It actually may be the day of the NFL Draft, or at least round one by the time you're watching this, but hopefully either way you can take some kind of perspective in this in terms of who the Jaguars could potentially looking to draft, and we're going to explore that on today's show. This is Jags Now, presented by Prize Picks. I'm your host, Cullen Brown, and guys, I just want to say thank you guys so much. The support since we've kicked off this channel back in January has been unbelievable, and we're on the road to 3,000 subscribers. Help us get there. Hit that subscribe button. The latest Jags news and rumors all off-season long and into the season. We'll have you covered on everything Duval County. Important note to make before we get into this mock draft. No trades. I know our guy James Gladstone loves to make a good trade, hence the trade that he made last week for Ruka Row. That being said, it's just kind of hard to predict trades in this predictive mock draft. I decided to just take the Jaguars' 11 draft picks for what they were and give an NFL draft prospect, that I think could make sense for Jacksonville and ultimately where I think the front office could make it. That being said, if you had to ask me, hey, do you think it's more likely that Gladstone does end up making a trade during the NFL draft? I would say yes, but we're not going to do that on this mock draft, so just want to get that one out the way. Getting into it, Jaguars' final mock draft, at number 56 overall, I'm going with Anthony Hill Jr., linebacker out of Texas. We all know the Jaguars lost Devin Lloyd during NFL free agency, and they could look at a guy like Fitzgerald Miller to play alongside Afoye Oluokun at that linebacker spot, Anthony Campanelli's defense. That being said, if Anthony Hill Jr. is here at 56 overall, he'd be a tempting selection for the Jacksonville Jaguars. 69 tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, 3 pass breakups, 2 interceptions, 3 forced fumbles, 1 fumble recovery. He is all over the field, and he was last season for the Texas Longhorns. And I do think Anthony Hill is going to be somebody that the Jaguars are looking at potentially drafting. They did have him for a draft visit at the NFL Combine. We do know this. And again, you're looking at this linebacker room. It's not necessarily the worst thing in the world if Fitzgerald Miller is going to be starting alongside Afoye Oluokun, but to me, Anthony Hill has the potential to be a special linebacker in the National Football League. He's got the athletic ability to cover sideline to sideline. I think he's really got really good run instincts. He's been up and down in terms of, his coverage, play to play in terms of his consistency. But I do think that if you're the Jacksonville Jaguars, linebacker is a position that I would expect him to still address on day 2. And a guy like Anthony Hill, if he's there at 56, it would be hard-pressed for me to see the Jaguars passing up on him. But I want to hear from you guys. Anthony Hill is my official prediction for the Jaguars at number 56 overall. I think he's a do-it-all linebacker that's got great talents at the next level. But I want to know in the comments section, who's your official prediction for the Jaguars at number 56 overall? Let me know down below in the comments section. Without any further ado, let's get into the rest of the show. But first, we got to tell you guys about our sponsor, and that, of course, is Prize Picks. Today's show is sponsored by Prize Picks, America's #1 sports picks app. The playoffs are here for basketball. Baseball is underway, and it's time to cash in with Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 sports picks app and is the best place to win cash while watching sports. If you're a hoops guy, you can go with points, rebounds, assists, blocks, or 3-pointers. And if you're more of a seam head, you can choose hits, home runs, or strikeouts. The app is really easy to use. Just pick more or less on a few player stats and lock in your lineup. For example, this is actually an example of a lineup that we've used in previous. I've got a season-long fantasy lineup. Producer Athan, if you could get to that one, for the football season that I like for the upcoming year, and it goes as follows. Trevor Lawrence, give me the more on his passing yards. He's at 4,000 yards 3 times in his career. I like him to go around that number again. And then Tedero McMillan, more on his receiving touchdowns. I think the sky's the limit for him this upcoming year. $20 to win $60 on this lineup. I really like my picks. And again, you can copy or fade my lineups. Just do it with our friends over at Prize Picks. New user offer. Download the PrizePicks app today with the link in the comments and the description and use code HMA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code HMA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. It's good to be right. All right, getting into round number 3. Pick number 81 overall. I'm going with Keyron Crawford, the edge out of the University of Auburn. He's a guy who I think the Jaguars would really like to add to this edge position group in the offseason. And in round 3, I think Keyron Crawford's a prime name to add to this Jaguars pass rush. Look at the scouting report on Keyron Crawford. He's got high motor, bendy player who offers burst and twitch off the edge. Still plenty of untapped potential as well. Way too high on the missed tackles over his college career. You see the numbers on screen this past season for the University of Auburn. 36 tackles, 9.5 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, and 43 pressures. And he's somebody that, you don't have to show this, Ethan. Crawford would become your third best edge rusher by a landslide. You obviously extended Trayvon Walker this past offseason. And I think Josh Hines-Allen, both those guys are 2 of your top 15-ish edge rushers in the National Football League. But you need depth outside of that. Danny Strigo is a nice story, somebody that I think is worthy of being in the rotation. But you need to add to that position if you're trying to have waves of pass rushes and really be a defense that can kind of put the pressure on opposing quarterbacks when you do get that league. I think Keyron Crawford is the name that you could look to get to. All right, moving into the second of 3 third-round picks, I'm going with Justin Joly, the tight end out of NC State. Guys, I don't know if you guys are aware of this for the Jacksonville Jaguars. They've taken a very big interest in the tight end position during this kind of pre-draft process. And if you look at the Jaguars' tight end depth chart, obviously we expect Britton Strange to get an extension any day now. They brought back Quentin Morris on a friendly 1-year kind of extension. Patrick Herbert, Hunter Long, we'll see what their futures hold. As of this right now, the Jacksonville Jaguars have no tight ends under contract past 2026. It's kind of crazy to think about with all 4 of those guys on the roster. And again, I would expect Britton Strange to get a contract extension here at some point. And why not pair him with a guy who, in Strange, you've kind of got to do it all tight end. He can block for you. He can be an inline. He can also be a receiving threat. Somebody that's just a do-it-all kind of weapon, a really balanced tight end. Well, why not get a guy like Justin Joly to pair with him and give Liam Cohen more of a 2 tight end, maybe even 3 tight end options whenever he's calling his offense in 2026. Let's look at the scouting report on Justin Joly. Fluid athlete with elite body control, framing and consistent results in contested catches, strong hands with a few drops and fumbles, iffy run blocker, and has room to grow as a route runner. And he's a guy that I think would be more of a vertical threat as compared to Britton Strange. You saw 7 touchdowns, 10 yards per catch last season for NC State. A really ideal option if you are the Jaguars. I think they want to have a little mismatch in terms of potential tight end options. Look at Justin Joly on day 2 as a potential Jaguars tight end target. Moving into the final third-round pick, we're going defensive tackle. I know they just added one in Ruka Roro, but I don't think the Jaguars are going to be done. And at pick 100 overall, if this guy and Chris McClellan is there for you, the defensive tackle out of Missouri, he to me would be an ideal fit to continue to get younger along that Jaguars defensive line. Dane Brugler does a great job covering the Athletic and covering the NFL draft through the Athletic. Had this to say on Chris McClellan. McClellan isn't a consistent disruptor, but he checks boxes with his physical characteristics and developing and recognition skills. He projects as a rotational lineman on the interior who can give teams quality snaps as a 0-1 technique. So something that, if you're looking at this Jaguars defensive line, obviously you got Eric Armstead, Devon Hamilton. The way the Jaguars seem to be operating, it sounds like they're going to keep both Armstead and Hamilton, right? You just trade for Ruka Roro, so he's going to be kind of your more 3-tech guy that can give you a little bit of pass rush juice from the interior, so he'll slide in behind Armstead. Matt Dickerson, you did bring back on a 1-year deal, but if you had Chris McClellan behind there, you can look to move off of Dickerson either in during training camp before the final cutdown day, or keep both of them on the roster and then have McClellan take over for Dickerson as a backup nose tackle to Devon Hamilton, who he himself is 29 years old. I think it would be a really smart move for Jacksonville if they continue to add to that defensive line during the NFL draft. Moving on to round number 4. Pick number 124. And it's a guy the Jaguars also had a pre-draft visit with. It is Travis Burke, the offensive tackle out of Memphis. Dane Brugler had this to say on the Memphis Tiger. Burke is a towering tackle prospect with predictable leverage issues, but he also has solid movement ability and a nasty disposition that will endear him to pro coaches. He has tools worth drafting in the mid-rounds to be a swing tackle and potential starter. I'd like to add a long-term swing tackle option. We've kind of talked about it ad nauseum. I think Cole Van Lanen, Anton Harrison, those are your bookends for the next 2 to 3 years. I don't think you have to even consider it. Walker Little, I think he's going to be too expensive to move on from this offseason, so you're probably going to keep him at least for another year. But as a, swing tackle option, he's fine. I just don't love the price point that he's at. So for the future of the position, I'm not really leaving it to Chuma Edoga. I'd rather add somebody else in there. And Travis Burke, Brugler mentioned it, he's a towering. He's like 6'9", so he's never going to have great kind of leverage skills when it comes to the run blocking game and maybe some guys that can kind of get under his shoulder pads, if you will. But he is a absolute physical just monstrosity that I think some NFL coaches are going to be wondering, hey, 4th round, should we take a guy like this? And I think Jacksonville will heavily consider it in the 4th round during the NFL draft. Moving on to round number 5, we got a guy in Billy Schrauth, the offensive guard out of Notre Dame. Now, interior offensive line is not something that I personally think that Jacksonville will look to heavily invest in early on in the NFL draft. I know I've seen Brugler, for example, he had Jennings Dunker as his kind of second-round selection for the Jacksonville Jaguars. But I do think that there is a case to be made that on day 3, could you look to add some more depth there? Billy Schrauth could be an interesting name. The scouting report on Mr. Schrauth out of the University of Notre Dame. He's team captain, physical, has nice hand power. Some really interesting moments and upside, but has missed a lot of time in his career, has battled through ankle and knee injuries over the past 2 seasons. So a little bit of concern there, which will cause him to fall to day 3, in my opinion. But you have Wyatt Milam, you have Jonah Monheim as kind of 2 interior options that I really like. On day 3, if you want to continue to add to it, maybe make a case that Billy Schrauth can make that final cut for your top 8, 9, 10 offensive linemen. I don't necessarily hate the plunge here because I think when he is on the field, you see the overall PFF grade. I think he's a pretty dang good prospect when healthy. All right, moving on to round number 5. The Jaguars solidified their kind of top-end cornerbacks for this upcoming season. Jordan Lewis, Travis Hunter. You obviously brought Bonteric Brown back, and you still have Jarian Jones. Still would like to add to this room during the NFL draft. And in the 5th round at 166, just a couple picks after Billy Schrauth, I have the Jaguars selecting Ephesians Prysock, the cornerback out of Washington. Really physically gifted corner, over 6'3", had a really good testing during the NFL Combine. His RAS score was, along with his teammate Tacario Davis, 2 really physically imposing corners at the University of Washington. And he played pretty well last year for the Huskies. 49 tackles, 8 pass breakups, 1 interception, and had a PFF grade of 77.9. To me, he could compete for a depth position, could maybe contribute on special teams with that speed. I think Ephesians Prysock would be a very interesting day 3 selection for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Moving on to round number 6, the lone 6th round selection for the Jacksonville Jaguars. We've got Le'Veon Moss, the running back out of Texas A&M. I've gone back and forth. Will the Jaguars add to this running back depth chart during the NFL draft? And I think Le'Veon Moss could give this room something that they don't quite have, because while Chris Rodriguez is going to be your thumper compared to Bashal Tutin, who's kind of your home run hitter, LaQuinn Allen can kind of give you some reps as a 3rd down back, not only as a pass catcher, but also in pass protection. Le'Veon Moss is kind of a bigger, physical running back who's got a really nice stiff arm. I think could be a nice threat in between the tackles for Jacksonville. And in the 6th round, yes, he has some injury concerns, not the greatest on 3rd down, but if you want to kind of have him, bring him in, competing during training camp and push maybe LaQuinn Allen or some others on this running back depth chart, I wouldn't necessarily hate it if I'm James Gladstone bringing a guy in like Le'Veon Moss. Moving on in, finally, to the final 7th round, these 3 last picks for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm not going to spend too much time on these guys, but just to kind of run through them here. Bishop Fitzgerald, safety out of USC, I'll be honest, I'm a huge fan of. Strong safety, played next to Kamari Ramsey. Former transfer, I want to say from the NC State, if I'm not mistaken, was really productive, only got better when he got to USC, and I think could compete more or less as a special teams option, but could be a nice, 7th round, day 3. Hey, could you compete to be Antonio Johnson's backup at the safety spot? I really like Bishop Fitzgerald in the 7th round. Vinny Anthony, the second out of Wisconsin, has some special teams value, could give you some return ability. If you're looking to go that route, you also need to add to that wide receiver room, in my opinion. He's an intriguing option out of the University of Wisconsin. And then Athan Kaliakmanis, the quarterback out of Rutgers. I do think the Jaguars might look to add a quarterback to compete for quarterback 3, obviously behind Nick Mullins and Trevor Lawrence. So look at Kaliakmanis as a potential round 7 option for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And that's it. My final predictive mock draft for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Grade it down below. A, B, C, D, or F. Let me know how I did, how accurate you think I'll be. And also, too, if you disagree with any of my picks, let me know why down below in the comments section. That is going to conclude this episode of Jags Now, presented by Chat Sports. Keep in mind, the NFL Draft, at the time we're filming this, will be tomorrow. So make sure you guys tune in because we will have videos and content covering all Jacksonville Jaguars, 11 draft picks, or if they eventually, maybe, trade one of those picks, we'll have all that stuff covered. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. Turn on your notifications for the best coverage of the Jacksonville Jaguars here on YouTube. And until next time, guys, we'll see you on the next one. Peace out.